Welcome to the Better Business Partnership webinar today, Intro to Net Zero for Business. Before we jump in, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land here, the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, and all other First Nation people, wherever you are located. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and extend my respect to any Aboriginal people present today. Make sure there we go. Hello everybody, my name is Amanda Choi. I coordinate the Better Business Partnership, a business sustainability program funded by local councils Ku-ring-gai, North Sydney and Willoughby, who you will be hearing more from today. The BBP program supports businesses to be successful through sustainability. We cover the full gamut of sustainability, the triple bottom line. On the top line, we cover environmental aspects, energy, water, waste, and reducing single-use plastic. We look at the social, both the community level and the staff that your business employs. And we look at sustainable purchasing, transport, and the business health, which includes financial and economic success. The team that delivers the BBP program to you, we have dedicated program managers in each of our partner council areas. These sustainability experts provide free tailored advice and support to guide you on your sustainability journey. The BBP program fosters a local sustainable business network through events online and in person. We have monthly educational webinars like today's to discuss a range of interesting and topical issues. And our next in-person event is in November, a sustainable movie and networking event to be held at Roseville Cinema. Let's jump straight into today's meaty topic, net zero. Firstly, I want to position today's discussion as an introduction, entry-level conversation about net zero and the concepts relating to it. There are definitely lots of resources that we will point you to that delve a lot deeper into this area, and it is extremely complex. So caveat today's session is going to take a bit of a bird's eye view. I'm not an expert by any measure, and so I will keep my commentary very brief. What we are going to do though is hear from our partner councils, looking at 3 case studies, what the councils Ku-ring-gai, North Sydney and Willoughby City are doing in this area. Recently, we have seen local governments and municipal cities across the world taking matters into their own hands and often going against state and federal government stated policies. But being close to the communities, they listen to their residents and they have declared the need for immediate action and taking a long-term view, implementing initiatives and changes that will contribute to getting us across the line. And finally, we're going to touch on what you can do as a business or as an individual to start your journey towards net zero. So just a quick visual reminder of what we are talking about here. Recent natural disasters seeming so unexpected and uncommon, 1 in 100-year events happening within a few years of each other, or months, or weeks. So what is in a degree or two anyway? The global expert body in climate change is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they regularly report on the state of play. In 2022, just this year, in relation to Australia, the IPCC said the projected global warming under the current global emissions reduction policies would leave many of the region's human and natural systems at very high risk and beyond adaptation limits. And extreme events such as heat waves, droughts, floods, storms and fires have caused deaths and injuries and affected many households, communities and businesses via impacts on ecosystems, critical infrastructure, essential services, food production, the national economy, valued places and employment. Delay in implementing adaptation and emission reductions will impede climate resilient development, resulting in more costly climate impacts and greater scale of adjustments, reducing the risk would require significant and rapid emission reductions to keep global warming emissions, to 1.5 to 2 degrees, as well as robust and timely adaptation. So what is the difference between 1.5 and 2? Well, quite a lot, it seems, as you can see from the table on the left. The devastation on impacts on environment, wildlife, biodiversity, and human health and wellbeing are staggering. If we remain within 1.5%, we have still considerable damage. But if we go to 2% and over, we're looking at from 70% to almost 100% coral reef devastation, from 6% at 1.5 to nearly 20% insect species, so important, underlying our ecosystems, and global population from 15% up to almost 40% exposed to extreme heat and extreme melting of sea ice in the Arctic, which we know has a terrible flow-on effect happening every 10 years. So what do we have to do to avoid this global fate? Obviously, we have to keep our global temperatures in check, but how? So this slide talks about the difference between net zero and carbon neutral, two terms that you've probably seen bandied around in the news, as well as in a lot of companies' advertising and marketing, particularly power retailers. So net zero is making a plan to actually reduce, so change, make behavioural changes, make capital changes, which have the impact of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to the very lowest, and then only then offsetting what is left as a last resort. Whereas the carbon neutral approach is not increasing, so leaving things as they are and trying to offset through carbon reduction projects, which might sequester carbon, or they might increase the ability of the to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So the emission scopes, and this is a very complex area, so this is a caveat very, very high level. According to the leading greenhouse gas protocol corporate standard, a company's greenhouse gas emissions are classified into 3 scopes: direct and indirect. Scope 1 and 2 are mandatory to report for a net zero program. Scope 3 are voluntary and harder to monitor. So the scope 1 examples are obviously not comprehensive, but they include direct emissions owned by the business, such as fuel or gas used by cars in the fleet, natural gas, boilers or water heating on premise, and refrigerants, for example, air conditioning or refrigeration on premise. Scope 2 is purchased electricity, and this is mainly through electricity or heat or steam and cooling that is produced from purchased electricity. Scope 3 emissions are emissions caused by business activities, which is everything else, everything from waste disposal to business travel, office equipment supplies, is a huge list. So you definitely need an expert to help you navigate through that. So into our second section of our BBP Partner Councils, and I must say that our councils are part of a much broader a group of councils that are all working alongside each other in this regard, and have each set targets that are in line with the IPCC targets. Councils are looking at their own emissions to cut those within the next decade, and then to encourage the community within their local government areas to reduce and reach net zero by the 2040 cut-off date that the IPCC recommend. So I am very happy to have with me, joining me, three very senior representatives from each of the councils. First, we're going to hear from Marnie Kikken, who is the Strategic Projects Lead from Ku-ring-gai Council and the architect of the strategy that we're going to hear from her. Danielle Birkbeck from North Sydney Council. She is the Senior Sustainability Programs Coordinator there and responsible for implementing the program that she will talk to. And Peter Lisle, the Sustainability Team Leader from Willoughby City Council. So I'm going to start off to present on each program, in some cases a case study from their net zero strategy. So I'll hand over to Marnie and I'll just click over to the first slide. Thank you, Marnie.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I'm Marnie from Ku-ring-gai Council. I'm very pleased to be joining you today. So firstly, I just wanted to recognise a really important point that Amanda's made and also to reiterate that, and that's to say that Ku-ring-gai Council has science-based targets, and that's why we have a net zero target by 2040. So as Amanda said, the IPCC in a recent report has stipulated that for us to have a good chance of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to get to net zero emissions by 2040. So that's the premise that we have at our council in terms of the effort that's required to move forward. Traditionally, we've focused on our own council operations, but in recognising that the target has to apply to the entire Ku-ring-gai LGA, we've now extended our reach, and I'm about to talk about a net zero community strategy. So that's a strategy of how we get to net zero emissions by 2040 for the whole of our community. So when we're talking about reaching net zero by 2040, it's important to look at our emissions by source as well as our emissions by sector. So if you have a look at that first graph on the left there, this is our baseline year for our 2040 goal is 1920. And you can see that electricity is the largest source of emissions we have in Ku-ring-gai. And then that's followed by transport and waste. So in terms of our approach moving forward, we really see the next decade as being focusing on our energy transition, so reducing those emissions from electricity and gas. And we see that the transport sector, that will have an important role moving forward from about 2030. So EVs, as we have greater uptake of electric vehicles, I should say, that's what EVs are moving forward. And we're starting to, get our emissions down from solar PV and reducing electricity, then there'll be a really important role to play for, the transport emission reductions. I think in Ku-ring-gai too, there's an enormous opportunity for electrical vehicles because of the reliance that we have on passenger and drivers of actual cars. So there's not a big public transport network outside of the railway lines there. So really important to kind of focus on that uptake. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the different sources of emissions that we're working on. And just that point on the right, emissions by sector, this is a webinar for businesses. So it's just to show you that the non-residential emissions represent 33% of Ku-ring-gai's emissions overall. So a third of emissions that the business sector can help us with in Ku-ring-gai. Next slide, please, Amanda. So my presentation is going to focus on the net zero community strategy. First, I'm just going to touch base on it being informed by extensive community consultation. Then I'm going to outline what the strategy is trying to achieve, which is to support the Ku-ring-gai community, including businesses, in transitioning to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. And then I'm going to talk about a key engagement tool that we're utilising, our Net Zero Champions Group. Thanks, Amanda. And one more click. So just wanted to touch base that the Net Zero Community Strategy was informed by extensive community consultation. We conducted a community survey, we held several community workshops, and we held several focus groups. So we had 600 survey respondents and 136 participants. And what really came through clearly from that, if you see in the top right-hand corner, is that 89% of our survey respondents said that they feel that individual action is crucial. So not just council action, but individual action. And that 84% of respondents said that council should play a leading role in our transition to net zero. So that's a really good mandate for us to move forward with a net zero community strategy. Down the bottom there, you'll see the top 10 actions from anywhere from rooftop solar through to cycling and walking, energy efficiency, right through to electric vehicles, EV charging stations, community solar and batteries, and FOGO services, which is food organics and garden organics, so organics recycling. So that gave us a really good indication of what the community wanted us to do in terms of net zero action in Ku-ring-gai. Next slide, please, Amanda. So just in terms of the strategy and how it relates to the business sector, so really across the whole strategy, Council's adopting a shared responsibility framework. So whilst Council wants to be a leader in the net zero transition, we recognise that we can't do it alone, and it's going to involve working together with the community, industry, you as the business sector, and other levels of government, and that's in terms of action as well as investment. We're going to need accelerated and scaled up action way beyond current levels to get to our net zero target. The lion's share of emissions have to occur in this decade, and Ku-ring-gai Council very much supports for businesses, particularly in relation to energy-related emissions, the carbon management hierarchy. So that's about energy efficiency as a first priority, if you're able to do it, then on-site renewable energy, so the installation of solar, if you're able to do that. Once you've ticked off those two big ticket items, either buying renewable energy or investing in community solar, and then as a last resort, buying carbon offsets, which we'll talk about further in this webinar. Next slide, please, Amanda. So in terms of what's in the net zero community strategy and how it relates to the business sector, so overarching the entire strategy is essentially the Better Business program. And that's what Amanda and her colleagues run. And that provides all businesses in Ku-ring-gai, as well as our partner councils in Willoughby and North Sydney, the opportunity to have a look at their whole business and how actions they might take within their business will contribute to net zero. So in terms of all of the different areas that we're trying to reduce emissions, whether it be in the energy sector, through waste management, or through sustainable transport, the BB program can assist businesses in all those areas. The other thing that we're implementing as part of our strategy is a net zero grants program, which businesses will be eligible for, which means that if you have an action that you've devised, hopefully through the BBP program, that's eligible for a net zero grant, you'll be able to apply to Ku-ring-gai Council for that funding. So that also will be across all of the energy, waste and sustainable transport emission areas. And they're the three areas we're focusing on helping businesses reduce emissions in. Just specifically in terms of the carbon management hierarchy that I just talked about, with energy efficiency, on-site renewable energy and community renewables or buying renewables, we have business rebates for businesses. So that's for things like lighting upgrades, sensors and timers and the like. And we also, for larger businesses, have level 2 energy audits. So you're able to get rebates from council to implement those projects to improve your energy efficiency. We also have business rebates for solar PV and batteries. And we also have a Sunspot solar tool, which helps businesses understand their potential for solar. So that's how we can support you in putting solar PV or batteries into your business and reducing emissions that way. In terms of community renewables or buying renewable products, we are investigating a community renewables project in Ku-ring-gai. So we're looking at the feasibility of having a community solar farm as an example, and then we'd be looking at business models for that in terms of community investment. So as a business, if you can't put solar on your roof, you could invest in a project like that, which would be contributing to the emission reduction in our local government area, even if you can't put something on site in your business. So that's a way that businesses will be able to be involved as we further the feasibility around these types of projects. For our larger businesses, again, we're looking at how council can support renewable energy power purchase agreements. So that's another way that we can support businesses in buying renewable energy if they can't put solar on their roofs and they've done all their energy efficiency measures. And green power is another initiative that businesses can do to contribute to buying renewables. In terms of waste management, within the strategy, we've got a line item to implement community organics recycling programs, as well as community recycling programs for hard to recycle items. So that's, again, 2 opportunities for businesses to be involved in those organics recycling or hard to recycle items programs. By community, we mean business too. So as we roll out those programs, there's hopefully going to be an opportunity for businesses to be involved in that. And finally, in terms of sustainable transport, We have business rebates for shared electrical vehicle charging stations, and we are also implementing a public EV charging installation program. So that's really going to facilitate the uptake of electrical vehicles in our LGA, and businesses can be supported through those two means. And finally, we have a program funded through our environmental levy for the provision of cycling and walking infrastructure. So that's about assisting people to be, more active in LGA in terms of active transport, that cycling and walking component. So they're all the areas that we'll be able to support businesses in trying to achieve our goal of net zero. Next slide, please, Amanda. And finally, I just wanted to talk about our Net Zero Champions group. So we have 75 members on our Facebook group, 135 Net Zero Champions, and 600 on our Net Zero mailing list at the moment. So the Net Zero Champions are a group of like-minded community members, and they want to be involved with council in reducing energy, waste and transport emissions. And we have 4 project groups at the moment: EVs and sustainable transport, electrification and community renewables, organics, waste and composting, and a reuse, recycle, repair group. So this is what we are facilitating in terms of that shared responsibility framework. And there's nothing to say that your business can't get on this Facebook group or our Net Champions group, start projects with other businesses, or contribute as a business within Ku-ring-gai. So that's another means in which you can connect with other people that are trying to solve the problem and work with council to be able to collectively reduce our net zero emissions to 2040. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks so much, Marnie. That's a fantastic overview. I know that the Net Zero Communities Champion Group has a couple of BBP businesses in there. Very exciting and doing some great work in relation to particularly the circular economy. Yeah, it's definitely the BBP rebates are fantastic, going well. So any business in Ku-ring-gai wanting to embark on any of those sustainable initiatives, let Min or myself know. So I'm going to introduce Danielle. I've just put into the chat, I noticed that there are no questions as yet. So please, if you have any question for any of our council panelists or myself, but I must say, if they're tricky questions, I'll take them on notice and get them answered after this. But please put your questions in, and for those we can answer, we will be doing that after the presentations. So I'm going to invite Danielle to talk to us about the North Sydney program.
Thank you, Amanda, and welcome everybody here today. My name's Danielle. I am the Sustainability Programs Coordinator from North Sydney Council. So today I'm going to talk to you about North Sydney emissions and how we are working to achieve our targets in our environmental sustainability strategy. So North Sydney Council has set ambitious council and community targets for the reduction of energy, waste and water since 2002. However, over the last decade, it has become increasingly evident that in order to tackle climate change and contain warming to that 1.5 degree target, our previous targets and efficiency efforts have not been strong enough to yield the dramatic drop in greenhouse gas emissions that are required. So in July 2019, North Sydney Council declared a climate emergency. And then in July 2021, we adopted our 2030 environmental sustainability strategy. So Council's environmental sustainability strategy sets out our targets in 7 key areas. Today we're talking about net zero, and North Sydney Council actually, we don't have net zero targets, but we have carbon footprint targets in our 2030 strategy. So back to that slide that Amanda showed earlier, we have our carbon footprint targets. The council will have its electricity needs met by 100% renewable energy by 2030. And actually we will achieve this by January next year, where all large and small council sites will be powered by renewable energy. Our council operations are to be 100% carbon neutral by 2030. And with regards to our community target, we have a 65% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So thinking about those targets and looking at the graphs that you can see on the screen, North Sydney's emissions by source is probably like every other of the partner councils here. Electricity is our highest emitter, followed by transport and then waste. When you're looking at our emissions by sector, you can see that 24% of our emissions come from multi-unit dwellings, so our strata, and combined non-residential retail and non-residential commercial, that accounts for 48% of our emissions, and we lump our business community in that emissions sector. So that's why at North Sydney we've decided to focus on strata and businesses in our community targets, and we're going to focus on helping them reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please, Amanda. So what are we going to do in order to assist North Sydney community in achieving these targets? So firstly, we're going to prioritise decarbonisation through electrification. So we are going to electrify everything, and we will have a campaign that will be launched in mid-2023, mid next year for that. So in that campaign, we're promoting the switch to clean and renewable energy sources and hoping to rapidly transition our community away from fossil fuels, the use of fossil fuels, including coal and gas. And again, we're going to prioritise strata and businesses in that Electrify Everything program. So what will that focus on electrification look like for our residents? Basically, it will mean an increase in the number of households and businesses with rooftop solar, electric vehicles instead of petrol or diesel, heat pump hot water heaters instead of gas, reverse cycle air conditioners, induction cooktops and household batteries to store solar power. It's anticipated that the average Australian would need to make about 7 changes or new electric acquisitions to enable them to electrify everything. So council are assisting our strata through a number of our programs that we have here, mainly our Future Proofing Apartments program. So this program aims to improve the environmental footprint of strata buildings in the North Sydney LGA by identifying and implementing priority actions that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and potable water consumption. So council funds audits that inform a business case for a range of upgrades that strata can then implement. We do know that cost of upgrading and purchasing these new acquisitions is often a challenge that needs to be overcome. And so as part of our Electrify Everything campaign, we will as well be offering subsidies and rebates for both strata and businesses to assist with that change. Next slide, please, Amanda. Okay, so what are we doing to help businesses? Again, we're promoting electrification and getting off gas, especially through gas used in cooking, heating and hot water. And for those that can't install solar on their rooftop, we're promoting the purchase of green power. We also advocate composting to deal with food waste in businesses, and we're now inviting small businesses to join our Compost Revolution program. We are part of the City Switch program for tenanted office space. We do also have the Environmental Upgrade Agreement program for businesses, which provides finance for environmental upgrades. We too provide sustainable transport recommendations to businesses, and we have EV charging in 5 of our public car parks. And we have the Community Recycling Centre available to businesses in North Sydney for those hard to recycle items. We are also helping certain types of businesses, and I'll say cafes in this particular instance, and other commercial kitchens through one of our new programs, which is our All Electric Cafes program. Basically, the program looks at opportunities in the cafe to electrify and in turn reduce greenhouse gas emissions and running costs of the business. So we've recently completed a case study on the North Spoon Cafe in McMahon's Point, who became the pilot cafe for this program. So the North Spoon Cafe are tenants in a council-owned premises in McMahon's Point. And through Council's Solar for Rentals program, a 14 kilowatt solar PV system was installed on the adjacent community centre rooftop. Council also owns that building. That PV system now supplies the cafe with their electricity. So in the Solar for Rental scheme, the building owner purchases the PV system and charges the tenant a fee to recoup those purchase costs. So over the 12-month period, we found that the cafe used 91% of the solar generated from those panels, which covered 34% of the cafe's annual energy use. So that was a great first step in reducing the cafe's greenhouse gas emissions and ongoing running expenses, but we knew more could be done. So we had a consultant do a report on the cafe, and they further recommended that the cafe switch their cooking equipment to induction, their hot water to heat pump, and then install more solar PV on the cafe roof if that was possible. In addition to that, Council has purchased leading food and beverage retailer Brain & Poulter's guide to cooking without gas, and we are now sharing that with the commercial kitchens in our local government area. It clearly sets out a business case for going all electric in the kitchen and getting off gas, including cost comparisons of various pieces of kitchen equipment. Council has also partnered with Brain & Poulter for concept kitchen designs for those kitchens serious about going all electric, and we offer that service as part of our All Electric Cafes program. So that case study just provided you with an example of one of the programs that we do here at North Sydney, but as I did mention earlier, we do work with our businesses on trying to achieve a reduction in their greenhouse gas emissions in many ways. We do have a lot more programs on offer, so I do encourage anyone to, any businesses in the North Sydney LGA to reach out to us, and we're happy to help at any time. Thank you, Amanda.
Oh, thank you so much, Danielle. I'm really excited about the Electrify Cafes program, and hopefully we can inspire some other cafes to make the switch as well. So to Willoughby City, Peter Lisle.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Peter Lisle here from Willoughby City Council, just following on from the great range of initiatives and discussion we just had with Ku-ring-gai and North Sydney. Just an observation is that the BBP is one way of contacting your local council. There's a wide range of opportunities, workshops, incentives, advice available through your council officers if you choose to call your call centres, or even take down the individual details of the officers presenting here today. Then we're always on hand to advise. Similar to Ku-ring-gai and North Sydney, you can see the scope and the pie charts relating to community gas emissions and the sectors which create these emissions. Willoughby, we have a net zero target for the community by 2040s or earlier. We have a 50% reduction in our community carbon footprint based on a 2008-2009 benchmark of 50% by 2028. At the moment, we've progressed around about 30% on that. The vast majority of those emissions reductions are based towards a greening of the grid, but I'll suggest we shouldn't get too complacent about that, because in New South Wales we're still kind of like consuming about 70% of our main grid electrical power comes from burning coal. So again, when we look at the opportunities and the incentives provided by councils to electrify a lot of your services in your homes and also in your businesses, this is one of the main ways that, in addition to the greening of the grid, that we can affect our collective and individual carbon footprints. So I think what we're looking at now is a bit more of a focus from all councils into making people personally aware of their carbon footprints and the ways that they can reduce their individual and their families and their businesses' carbon footprints. Amanda, next slide, please. So I'll just quickly mention the fact that we do have a 2040s or earlier net zero target for the community. It's basically quite hard for councils to influence this. Although we've heard a fantastic array of different programs and incentives brought on by North Sydney and Ku-ring-gai, Willoughby, we are re-evaluating what we are offering the community at this stage. We hope to come out with far more direct intervention programs, maybe starting next financial year. But what you have on the slide here is what we presently promote, and these details are available through our websites. I would ask people to look through your council websites, because that's where the most up-to-date information is. And then if necessary, you can contact your local council directly, or even come to all of us or your BBP officer directly. So what we have then, we have a Live Well in Willoughby campaign, which has been our education campaign going for many years. I've highlighted a few of the workshops coming up. All Electric Home on the 21st of September. There's an EV showcase in Chatswood Mall on the 8th of October. So if you're looking to buy an EV, or just to see how they work, or even go and sit in one, you can go to Chatswood Mall on the 8th. And then we've got an Energy Efficiency for Renters webinar on the 26th of October. All of your councils have sign-up opportunities, and the BBP does as well for our electronic newsletters. It's one great way of keeping up to date with what's going on in your local council. Other programs we have here in Willoughby include, obviously, we have a very successful solar PV battery bulk buy system. Basically, it's preferential rates. We've identified one reputable installer. We review the installer and the feedback and the customer surveys every quarter, so it's still continuing. Details of that particular opportunity are available on the Willoughby website. Okay, and to date, we've been installing one extra solar PV system per week. So it's been going about a year now. We've had about 60 systems installed across Willoughby. Okay, also we have free advice for homes and businesses. Doesn't matter what your size. I take on that responsibility for having a look at your electricity bills and offering you advice and having a chat about your personal circumstances for homes and businesses. And then we do have a consultant available to provide specific advice if it's necessary. Okay, EV charging, again, we have promoted both within council and outside of council our EV facilities. There are 12 EV charging points provided by council in the LGA. If you're ever interested to look at the provision of EV charging across the country, there's a website. The details are just shown on your screen. PlugShare, and just look into Australia, then you can see how many EV charging points there are in your locality or even close to your home. And of course, council now, as well as the private sector, are rolling out increasing amounts of EV charging close to you. Council have a responsibility, so we are now looking at net zero by the 1st of July 2025. It's a large focus on what we're doing. Council comprises about 1.5% of the total carbon footprint for the LGA. So what we are putting into practice now within council, the learnings from that are applicable across the LGA. But things are changing quickly in the carbon environment, I would say. So keep up to date with the local council, see what's going on the websites. If you do need any further details, then you can contact me directly, especially if you're in Willoughby. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks so much, Peter, and thank you to each of our council representatives for such a comprehensive deep dive into your net zero plans and strategies. We're all just at the beginning of this journey, so I suspect more initiatives will come into play very soon, and we'll let our audience know how they can play a part in it. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, and please put your questions into the Q&A. I've got a couple for our panelists, but we'd love to hear what you'd like to know more about. So I just wanted to end with a little section on, for our audience, what is the pathway for our businesses to net zero. And really, you know, it is about making those decisions in your business which reduce emissions, and some of them can be quite big decisions, and they don't come about day to day, but it's keeping that front of mind. And the first point is, you know, changing, if you haven't, your superannuation and your banking, because your dollar definitely has power So what you're funding and the organisations that you bank with, what they're funding makes a huge impact. And we've seen some big changes in the last few years. So that's an easy one, hopefully, bit of research and changing over. As we've heard today, going solar rooftop is definitely a very good way to reduce your emissions. And if you don't have a rooftop to put solar on, hopefully there will be more opportunities for community solar, as Marnie was talking about. Reducing your business waste emissions, well, BBP, we are the experts in that, so come to us for help in that. Our program managers are very keen to help you reduce those emissions. We will talk in a minute about electricity and green power, but following on from what North Sydney is advocating, electrify everything, replace gas with electric. Dr. Saul Griffiths, I'll send out a link to one of his webinars, which really goes into this, talking about rewiring Australia. He says to electrify everything and move to renewable energy, whether it's, whichever order. Changing from fuel to electric vehicle when they become more available, hopefully, and more reasonably priced, which I believe is the tipping point. I think Saul Griffin said about 2025. So there should be some more vehicles coming onto the market soon. That's what I'm waiting for. And supporting suppliers who also aspire to be net zero. So those who are on that journey, sustainable purchasing and supporting those who are also reducing their emissions. And lastly, carbon offset remaining emissions. So we'll have a little chat about that as well quickly. So this one, I'll send out links in the email, in the email following this. Obviously, energy efficiency is something that we can all address today. And we would love for our businesses to revisit that with their accreditations with our BBP program managers. Rooftop solar, so looking at the little diagram, which I've borrowed, without citation, from the City of Sydney with a Go Green Power campaign, which is quite a recent one. Rooftop solar obviously trumps, but then green power, which we've mentioned a few times. It's an accredited program by the Australian government, which certifies that the power is 100% renewable. So green power is the way to go. There are a couple of websites that we would recommend for you to look at. Green Electricity Guide, which is put out by Greenpeace, and Energy Made Easy, which is a website, a comparison website provided by the Australian government. At the moment, as I'm sure you know, there are incredible ups and downs in the power market. So it's definitely worth having a look at and seeing what is available. Even a small percentage of green power, adding in a percentage of green power into your power purchases will make a difference. And then we'd encourage you to go up the grid, go up the scale. So carbon offsetting is a bit of a contentious issue, and I think there, with a lot of our, there's a lot of companies out there talking about carbon neutral, carbon offset, a very valid exercise. But, and I took this from a company called Trace, which is a company which helps with carbon offsetting. It's not a silver bullet, but if it's used alongside a proper carbon reduction plan, so really reducing to net zero, then offsetting is an effective way of tackling any remaining unavoidable emissions. So often it's said that, for a company just to not make any reductions and just offset is just to sort of maintain the status quo. We're obviously, and our councils are advocating the net zero approach to reduce first as much as you can, and then offset where you can't. So I've got here just some other programs and resources, and I will send out some links in the email following. The City Switch program, which Danielle mentioned, in North Sydney, but is available to all tenant-based businesses. They're launching a Pathway to Net Zero program next week. So check out their website. There will be some really great materials that they release. We have offsetting advisory for SMEs. For small and medium enterprises needing assistance in how to tackle this massive initiative. Zero Emissions Sydney North, which is a volunteer program. They are collaborating with quite a few councils in the Northern Sydney area, and they have some great materials, events and programs. You can volunteer with them to become more involved, and they're really involved at that community level. Ku-ring-gai Net Champions, which Marnie spoke to us about. I think there was 75, and they're often champing at the bit to start their own projects, supported by council, but not run by council, which is fantastic, the community taking action. And then Climate Active, have a look at that. It is a program which does provide accreditation for businesses, schools, and households to become net zero. There is an online tool to measure and report out, as well as a whole lot of actions that you can undertake in order to get to net zero. So I'm going to close that off and have a look at the questions. Let's see. Okay, so we had one for Danielle, which seems to be answered. There was a one-page sheet on the council website. Okay, so coming in next financial year, I guess there's still quite a lot in the wings and being planned by our councils. So I'll just stop sharing so we can see everybody. Hello, everybody. So I actually have a couple of questions, and I know that all of the councils are either moving or have moved to renewable energy for their own operations. My question is, where is that energy coming from? Is it green power, or is it a solar farm? Where is the council's green electricity coming from? Marnie, are you coming off mute?
Yeah, well, I think we were all part of a power purchase agreement recently. So the 100% renewable energy that we're talking about for our grid sourced electricity is coming from 3 solar farms in regional New South Wales.
Fantastic. Okay. We have one more. So the question, is this the same for strata? Danielle, I think that's a question for you in relation to the
Yeah.
offer.
So we will, our rebates and subsidies program that we're developing will be for strata and businesses, yes.
Okay, and that's all coming into financial year beginning 2023.
Yeah.
Great.
And I'll probably add there, Amanda, that we also have rebates for strata as part of the Ku-ring-gai suite of rebates as well. I was concentrating on our business rebates, but they're available for strata if there's a Ku-ring-gai strata manager out there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's definitely so many strata buildings in our LGAs. On that, I wanted to ask about, with the electrification strategy, will gas be allowed in new developments, and does this actually flow through into, planning decisions in our LGAs?
That's an interesting question. I think for North Sydney and probably for the other partner councils too, we do not wish to see gas in new developments. However, our DCP has not been updated to reflect the changes that have been occurring in the sustainability field over the last few years. So for us, we advocate for no gas to be put in new developments, and North Sydney is actively trying to get all our council sites off gas. So new developments, absolutely, we are advocating for no gas. However, it's not in the DCP as yet, so we are just trying to make suggestions to our planners to include these sustainability provisions whilst they're assessing DAs and things like that. Yeah.
That would be a similar case for Ku-ring-gai as well, is that it's not within our DCP. The avenue for, I guess, businesses or community advocating for that would be in DCP reviews and those going out to public exhibitions. So I know at Ku-ring-gai we have a DCP review, Development Control Plan review coming up, but same situation with Danielle, we would be advocating for it, but it's not presently within our current DCP.
It's an interesting point about both domestic use of gas and also commercial or strata use of gas. I've just reviewed a proposal by one of our, and this capacity is available through all councils if you choose to contact them. Just review a PV proposal in line with a changeover from a gas boiler, which is on its last legs, over to using heat pump technology. So the two things are kind of about a 3-year payback in this particular for quite a substantial investment, but the paybacks are maybe more substantial, a lot shorter than what you may anticipate, but you have to plan ahead. Quite often at home or even in any kind of any business or facility, if things fail, then you need a quick response, and quite often you go like for like. And if you're investing money capex into any form of hardware, quite often it's just the emergency overrides everything else about good planning decisions. So you have to be on the front foot. You have to look at the environmental impact. It's increasingly evident now with using gas. You know, the environmental aspects using of fracking, for example, fugitive emissions. Gas is one of the fossil fuels that we have to phase out very quickly if we're going to meet our science-based targets of 1.5, let's say within 1.5 degrees warming. So a little bit of detail of what councils can provide and a bit of text context as to why we all need to act individually, both on a household level and also a business level and personally, as to change the way that we conduct our business and our lifestyles. Bit of an overview there, but
I might also
you will understand where I'm coming from. Yeah,
pick up on a point that Danielle raised, which was around environmental upgrade agreements. So some of these capital changes might be quite costly. Solar, heat pumps, changes to HVAC. Environmental upgrade agreements, which are available to the commercial building owner, is able to take out an environmental upgrade agreement with funding. So our councils, Ku-ring-gai and North Sydney, Willoughby would need to work through, but the funding is available through a third party, and often those projects, those sustainable projects, can pay back very quickly, and the funding is fixed for a long term. It is connected to the title of the commercial property, so it suits businesses that own their commercial properties or businesses that have very long-term leases and have good relationships with their landlords. But often these investments are going to really increase the value of the property. So that's a good option if you're thinking about undertaking any heat pumps or solar. Okay, I've just checked. I think that's the end. So thank you so much for joining me and taking the time to take us through those plans. It's really exciting, and I know BBP really loves being part of and working with our partner council teams on these initiatives. So as always, BBP is your first point of call. We're our one-stop shop. We're not the experts, but we know who they are, so we can put you in touch with them. Our next webinar, I'll just take a minute to plug, is on the 5th of October, and it's on responsible business. So our better businesses, where to after accreditation as a better business? Well, responsible business, which is, I suppose, best represented by the B Corp status. We'll learn all about better businesses becoming B Corps, what's involved, what are the benefits, and we'll have some special guests from our BBP network. We've locked in Nicole from Sessions Hairdressing, Sasha from Tombag, and we'll see how we go with our other panelists. But thank you so much. I will close the webinar unless there's anything else. Thank you and see you next time.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.
Bye.